Hello everyone and welcome to episode 95 of Podcast vs Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. My name is Court and this week the fireteam is finally back to normal. Impetus and Saint join me for another week diving into Destiny PvE. It's good to be back with my fellow hosts. What have we been up to, Impetus?
We have been conquering, or trying to conquer, or definitely conquering, but it was a little shaky there in the middle. That's what we have been up to. First try conquerors, easy, gilded a million. Don't even worry about it. Yeah, we've been doing some GMs. It's been good to have the full fire team, the trio of excellence back together to jump into the new GM, which we're going to be talking about shortly, and then also some of our returning ones, and putting a spin on it, having some fun, doing some challenges of our own, and enjoying live, laugh, loving through those. But yeah, I've been doing just those two GMs with you guys, and then I haven't really done a whole lot. I've been trying to go flawless this week in trials because of the double rewards, but haven't done that yet. I don't feel too strongly about it, but yeah, we'll see if that happens. Saint, how are you doing? What have you been up to besides GMs?
It's been a chaotic week for me. Only 1 week. It feels like a month. We adopted another cat. We have a kitten who's about 9 weeks old and is very sweet and cute. But unfortunately, when we brought this kitten home, it took us a few days to realize, or even just a day to realize that she not only had fleas, but then a few days later realized that she also has ringworm, which is just super sad and tough on them, but also very contagious, and we don't want to catch it, and we don't want our other cat to catch it. So that's just been a nightmare. And for anybody that does not know, it is basically, it has nothing to do with actual worms, which is strange, but it's like a skin infection that is like super contagious. So just caring for the little kitten and having to deal with all that stuff and just cleaning the house has like dominated, honestly, most of my time outside of work and C# class. So that's been a lot. I did dip my toes into some Power World this week, which is just really unhinged, but fun. It's got this like Minecraft style server setup where you can like host a world and have friends join in. I think that there's like a lot of potential there, even though it's not very stable right now. The networking and stuff for that is just not super stable, but I know that Microsoft's going to be working on that. So yeah, having some fun in Power World. It's just really ridiculous, dealing with all the cat and stuff. And yeah, did some GMs. I did Riven's First Wish, which was okay. I get another Icy Memento, which is tight, but yeah, I was just hoping for like a little less tedious, like a little more difficulty in those wishes. But it was just like random content that they threw in pretty much at the last minute. So we'll see where those go over the next few weeks. Court, how you been, man? It's been a minute. How you feeling? How you doing?
It's been a hot minute. It's been since, Impetus and I, we recorded an episode at the start of January, but we're now recording this at the start of February, so it's been a while. I've largely been absent from the gaming scene. Normally I'm pretty active in the various Discord servers that I'm attached to, but over the last couple of weeks, not so much because I've been recovering from a throat infection. I'm still I've got little kind of remnants of that, so I probably won't be talking as much this episode. I also celebrated my birthday. These guys mentioned a few weeks back. Do wish, want to thank everyone that reached out and sent well wishes and all that. It was great. But I was still kind of like half recovering, still half down and out because of my throat infection. So there wasn't a lot of celebrations, just seeing friends and family and that. But yeah, I've been playing a little bit of Destiny. A lot of the most recent content that I've done was with these guys doing some GMs. I've done maybe the odd dungeon and raid run, but beyond that, it's been kind of outside of Destiny. But I mean, even if I could play some Destiny, it's just been just completely down and out because my throat infection. I could barely sit on the chair and just look at the screen because I was just just wanted to go back to sleep and just sleep this off. But yeah, much better now. But yeah, thank you to everyone that reached out and all that jazz. Hashtag Evil Wizards. I mean, obviously that was a couple of weeks back for hunters, I should point out. But we'll talk about that in a few seconds. I was listening to this podcast, so I think we all say this whenever we're not on that podcast episode, we'll listen back and hear the other hosts talk about stuff. And also I had 2 episodes where Impetus and Saint had some really great recommendations. Personally still chasing some solid Parabellum, Breakneck and Crux Termination rolls. Speaking of Crux, just a kind of highlight, I know Impetus and Saint went into some really great detail with Crux being like top tier, like we're talking S tier. But just to highlight that it's been Clown Cartridge on Crux is the first roll since many seasons ago, back since like Hothead released was the last time we had Clown Cartridge on that. If you want to know what the Clown Cartridge plus Bipod, how much in the magazine you can get 3. And of course, Crux does get permeability if you want to go down that route, all that funky stuff. And of course, Surrounded, you can get Surrounded on Crux as well, but it's probably better on Apex Predator because you can get the enhanced variant on Apex compared to Crux just having the normal Surrounded. But a fantastic rocket launcher. It's definitely something we're all trying to chase. It's the top kind of pick for the 3 of us. I know I don't have as many rolls. I think I've maybe got an explosive light roll. I may have a surrounded roll, but I want a really great roll. But these guys obviously recommended that a few episodes ago. But yeah, some great first tries with the GMs this week, lads.
Yeah, if you're watching this episode on YouTube, we will have 2 pieces of background footage that I'm going to use. It's going to be, one of them is the actual GM that we're talking about, which we'll get to in just a second. And the other one is a Battleground, a Mars Moon GM, right? Battleground GM, I think it was, where we were all using... Just Moon, yeah. All using various exotic sidearms. So enjoy, because that was tough. Actually, I thought it was going to be worse than it was. Turns out the Devil's Ruin is not bad. Even in the GM tier, it's okay. You got to use something to help its reload. You got to use like a loader or like a holster mod or something like that. But really could have been way worse, I feel like, going in with an exotic sidearm for the unstops. Court was using our new Buried Bloodlines, right? And then Impetus, I don't know which one I can't remember which one you were
Impetus was using a sidearm that does not have intrinsic unstop, in case you're wondering why Saint might be gushing about his choice. Yeah, I had Final Warning on, which, wow, that did nothing. Did nothing at all.
Hey, Unravel rounds, though. Right? I mean, hey.
Yeah, I'm just...
Well, it's Unravel. It's not Unravel rounds.
Oh, that's true.
Just to make a distinction, it's like volatility and volatile rounds. They're the same, but they're separate and distinctive for like champion purposes.
Couldn't even break barrier shields. It was a great time.
Well, you had anti-barrier sidearm.
Yeah. Well, you could see me. I'm trying to juggle a lot because Blessing and the Curse that Devil's Ruin has intrinsic unstop, so it's overriding the artifact mod. So I would proc Radiant with my sidearm and then have to swap to my other weapons to actually get the barrier down. I don't know, some memory, some dreamery. Don't let them be separate. All right.
I did try out Cryesthesia for our test run, not our actual first try run. And it was performing fine, and obviously it can accept Radiant for barrier, and it can deal with Unstoppable with the Freeze Blast, but I think it was just... I think with it being a primary ammo sidearm, unlike Devil's Ruin, where it's got a lot of damage potential, it's more of a utility sidearm, which is fine. I don't mind Cryesthesia as an exotic, but in a GM environment, it just wasn't quite hitting the target. Whereas when I swapped to Buried Bloodline, Man, that thing hits like a truck, and you can pair it into the whole, like, Falcon's Hunter. You can obviously get anti-barrier sidearm or volatility rounds for Buried Bloodline, and obviously Devourer is a really important aspect of that gun, and you can weaken once you've got the Catalyst. So I was really enjoying Buried Bloodline, so much that I forgot I had a kinetic hand cannon. I had as my like primary weapon. I did not use that whatsoever.
I forgot about that. Yeah, should probably get that dang sidearm. All right, let's move over to thanking the folks that keep the show running, regardless how much fun we have doing GMs with challenges. First, of course, we have to thank our sponsors. These folks go above and beyond in their level of support. So without further ado, thank you to A Modern Viking, Askian Monk, Bryce Aroni, Deacon, I'm K Rose, Moonlight, and This Moment. And as always, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials or via the Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord server. All kinds of feedback help with the trajectory of the podcast and how we present and break down builds, activities, and so much more in the PvE sandbox for all kinds of Destiny players. We do also want to extend a special thanks and appreciation to everyone that supports PvE, whether that is downloading and listening to the show, discussing it on social media in our Discord server, or supporting us via Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, if you'd like to support the show, please visit DestinyMassiveBreakdowns.com and click on the link to Patreon. You'll get access to the member-only channels in Discord, behind-the-scenes info like episode previews, input on the future of the show, and access to the legendary annual merch drop. All right, Saint, what are we discussing today?
We are going to talk about our second TWID of the year, and then a couple just Bungie news updates and highlights, some stuff you guys probably heard throughout the week. And then we're going to be digging in on the Psi Ops Cosmodrome GM, giving a breakdown of that, the builds that we used, what helped make it through that final boss room, which can be very chaotic. Before we get into our news section of the week, we did want to give a brief update on our general scheduling. So we got 4 months from the day that we were recording this until the final shape comes out. And until then, generally speaking, we are going to be dropping down to a fortnightly schedule as we enter, this kind of slower period, waiting for the expansion and all that stuff to be developed. We have some, GM breakdowns like this one today and some PvE University topics that we have slated for upcoming episodes. And then, obviously once news, previews and things like that start to pick back up, or if we get news about a mid-season patch or anything like that, obviously, we'll be jumping on to record episodes. And then definitely as we lead up in those weeks to the final shape, where we're expecting, as usual, they kind of start dropping a lot more articles and things like that about upcoming changes. If you have topics that you want us to talk about, things that you want us to review, traits or perks or anything like that, really, that you want us to break down, or even guests that you would like to hear from, feel free to reach out to us in, on social media or in the Massive Breakdowns Discord server, in the podcast chat. We're checking that PvE chat pretty frequently. So yeah, if you got things that you want to hear, topics that you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. We definitely have some space in the schedule between now and June. All right, let's jump into our news. We'll start off with some stuff from the TWID. Riven's Wishes started January 30th, completing weekly quests with a high-risk objective in the Dreaming City, like Legend, Lost Sectors, Dungeons, etc. will grant you wish tokens, which can be exchanged for one of 3 categories: Last Wish Red Borders, Lightfall Year Exotic Armor, and mementos like the Lost Memento, aka the All Black Shader, the Dawning Memento, the Icy One, and other in-game currencies. We'll have 6 weeks of wishes, so once this episode comes out, there will be 5 more pretty much until the final shape is when you have to use your tokens. So you'll have 6 tokens that you can earn over those weeks. One comment I wanted to make on this is it seems like the best thing that you can use the exotic tokens for is pretty much unlocking them in collections if you have not to focus them, as I believe they're dropping with pretty consistently low stats. So don't be expecting Banshee or Rahul, tier of focusing in the 60s, high 60s. Probably not going to be there. If you do need to unlock this armor, though, probably a good way to do that. Personally, probably going to be cashing out for, just some icy and blacked out shaders, mementos on my weapons. Are you guys done the first wish?
No.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to these. I know all 6 of them, the objectives are available on one of the websites. I'm not really thrilled about it.
I have done the first one because I wanted to see what the actual script, how this kind of mission structure worked out. I did see obviously the missions as well that have been published, but I think it's just like a kind of harks back to classic Destiny of you're repeating the same thing over and over, which, we have moved away from with the seasonal structure, which is then getting changed itself with the episode structure. But the first one is quite a doozy because you need that specific public event that happens on the, I forgot the name.
Rift Generator.
Area. Yeah. You can do it with one heroic completion if you can tag that as a heroic one, but the other one where it's like do activities on the Dreaming City, and like people are suggesting just to do the Lost Sector also in that same area where the Rift Generator spawns, and just keep entering the Lost Sector, kill the boss, pick up the chest, then just repeat. But instead I misread it at first. I thought it was referring to the Blind Well. So I was in the Blind Well for about 4 runs before it completed, and that's I've done the Blind Well thousands of times.
Yeah.
And that was at tier 3, I should point out.
Yeah.
I don't want to just go like
3.
super negative, but I do, when they said challenging objectives, I'm thinking you have to complete the Rift Generator on heroic and it can never drop below 100% health. Like, some kind of like, that's hard. But
that's a triumph as well. That's
and that's kind of where my mind went back to of like, well, why not draw on some of these? Like the Dreaming City had all kinds of like weird specific bosses to summon and go find to do the triumphs and stuff like that. I wish that they had drawn more on that stuff that they had written for the Dreaming City back in the day, rather than just go do some stuff in the Dreaming City, right?
It's good that you mentioned that, Saint, because I can't remember where you said it, but I can remember reading it on one of the servers on Discord, where you were talking about how the Dreaming City is fairly rich with boss content, with places where you can go and defeat a boss. And I'm not talking just about the Shattered Realm or like the public events or the Lost Sectors. I'm just meaning like roaming bosses or like secrets, is what they used to call them back then. Like the Dreaming City is a very rich place, but this do a public event and then a Lost Sector was just like, okay, it's one of these.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose, like, at the end of the day, none of us really need to do these. I mean, the 3 of us. I think pretty much the 3 of us have all the Last Wish Red Border weapons, if I'm not mistaken, or at least most of them that we care about. We've got our exotic armor, and we've got, I suppose, the things that we're after would be the ice and the all black shaders. Those are the 2 things that we'd be kind of wanting to chase after, but even at that, it's just like, well, they're just kind of cosmetic stuff anyway. So I knew from the start when they kind of announced this that this would not be for kind of us in terms of like Destiny veterans. It's for those that have maybe joined the season or they've joined post Forsaken. They didn't play a lot of the Dreaming City, but anyway, I think that's maybe for another story for another time.
Yeah, we don't have to keep dunking on the wishes. It's content. I'll go. I know, Impetus, you mentioned that they're all out there. I'm interested now to go check through the list of all the different objectives.
They actually, it's funny. One of them, you will need to go kill one of the secret bosses. Well, you don't need to go kill it. It's an alternative that will 100% the objective in question is if you go and kill one of the secret bosses. But Yeah, I mean, looking at them, it's like if you don't have the Cursebreaker title, the 6 weeks are going to probably get you most of the way there. Looking at what they expect you to do, like that special heroic version of the Rift Generator public event. You know, if you can get it at 100%, that takes care of that triumph. I don't have that, so I will go and try that. But yeah, it's doing a lot of other stuff. You do need to go do the 2 missions at some point in the coming weeks. Dark Monastery and the other one, I know that. Yeah, reading over it, I was like, dang, are they actually going to sunset Dreaming City after this? Because like this feels like the perfect way to make sure that everybody does do everything that's available in the Dreaming City. But then I remembered the Forsaken pack exists, and they would have given us a heads up by now if it was getting removed. But yeah, it will all have the Cursebreaker title pretty much at the end of this season based on the seasonal storyline, which is a bit strange. But I'm not complaining for the completionists at least. All right, let's touch on Festival of the Lost 2024. Can't believe we're already thinking about that. But yes, the vote was put out. Good wizard, evil wizard. Evil has prevailed in all the worst ways, unfortunately. Titans did hold strong. The wall did not break. So congrats to you guys for having good fashion sense, I suppose.
I'm chilling over here. I got my special shoulder pauldrons. I'm good, okay?
Yeah, sweet, dude. I've always wanted a pointy hat and the Amethyst Veil shader. That really is so cool. Can't wait to pay 6,000 bright dust for that nonsense. Well, plus 54% Warlocks. We got to do better. Come on, folks. This is not who we are, okay? This is not who we are. Hunters, I mean, whatever. Court, you excited about Evil Hunter?
Yeah, I said at the start, hashtag evil hunter wizard.
Jeez. All right.
Oh, man.
What? That good hunter... No, no thanks.
You know,
I think actually you guys asked like me, like assuming that I'd be part of the next episode, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
You were going to ask me my thoughts, and it was like, well, I was listening to the episode. I was like, well, these guys were thinking I was going to be pretty pro good wizard for hunters. I was no, absolutely not.
Well, it's a good thing we got that propaganda where we did then, because otherwise there's no way that would have flied. But Impetus, I was going to say, I heard that if you put these new Warlock Evil boots on and you click your heels 3 times, you will go straight to the North Pole. So
I'm just going to log off when Festival of the Lost 2024 rolls around. I won't play. I'm going to Pal World, dress myself up as a good Pokemon Slayer.
That's episode 95.
Yeah, exactly. I'm out. So, all right, what else do they talk about?
Yeah, speaking of things that may keep you from, signing off of Destiny for the rest of the season, they left a little, hint at a potential loot refresh at the end of our most recent TWID. We don't really know if that's going to be, inclusive of all the playlists or, what exactly that's going to look like, but I think that the expectation is probably that towards the middle of our really long season, we will see a refresh of some kind with our major playlists or whatever that, however far reaching that may be. I would think at least that would be like your core playlists, maybe bringing back an old weapon and adding in one new one per playlist or something like that is kind of the standard there. I know that there's a lot of, hopium copium action going on for the potential of a Garden of Salvation weapon rework and crafting, but there's not been any official word of any kind on that, and the loot refresh could just be the playlist stuff. We'll see.
I'm calling it right now. It's going to be dungeons. All the dungeons that don't have origin traits are going to get it. So, Pit of Heresy, Prophecy. I think the reason that they keep sharing the completion rates for dungeons and raids for Fireteam Finder is pointing towards that's the loot that would get prioritized. That's okay. It's not going to be Garden of Salvation. It's going to be the dungeons. That's like my version of the Bungie Monkey Paw Curl. Like, you want in-game PvE loot refresh? Dungeons, easy. Here you go. Like, no.
I obviously want to see Garden of Salvation and Vault of Glass to get their origin traits and then obviously be craftable. But the dungeons weapons, although they won't become craftable, because that's not how, I think they've said before that they prefer, it's more of an armor focus with the, with those, extra, with the extra mod slot for armor for master dungeons is what they go for instead. But yeah, I think, I never really thought about it, Because I think they've said in the past where they want to revisit dungeon weapons and kind of...
I could have sworn Chris said that on one of our interviews with him, actually.
Yeah, that's probably where I'm getting that from. I was going to ask a question. So, like, this isn't in the same caliber as when we had the 30th anniversary pack launch. But excluding that pack, did we get a refresh with loot elsewhere in the game? If we can remember.
I feel like it was just
like during a long season?
Like, all its new weapons,
like during
right?
that season when it was like cut in half with... It was the season then we had the 30th anniversary pack. Was there a like a loot refresh on top of that? No, right.
No, it was all just dares, which did also drop like old armor, right, for doing the special version of it, but it was high stat old armor. And then we all realized that didn't matter because Artifice armor also came out during that time. But yeah, there wasn't a playlist refresh. We just had an extended season to grind out adept weapons and GMs. And then nothing happened during Season of Arrivals because that was a much shorter extension of the season.
Well, we got like our first trace rifle, we got the Battler, we got Forerunner. So I think that just kind of kept everybody's attention.
For dares, right? When dares dropped.
Yeah. Like I'm certainly not anticipating the same level of like, oh, here's a bunch of new stuff. I don't think that's what they're hinting at here. I think it is just going to be like a loot refresh. And I do like your idea there, Impetus, where it could be a bunch of dungeons that are getting some refreshes, which would be pretty good because, as you mentioned, they have been sharing a lot of stats about like dungeon runs with Fireteam Finder. Fireteam Finder's getting a lot of attention right now. I've used Fireteam Finder a lot as well. It's very a useful tool, especially for dungeons and grandmasters, but specifically dungeons. I think it would probably make more sense because there's a lot more engagement that are happening with dungeons at this time anyway, is what the impression I have with the amount of stats that they've been sharing. The amount of Fireteam Finder lobbies that are open for dungeons, I think you might be on the money there.
Yeah, and Dreaming City Weapons got an origin trait update. That's dropping from Shattered Throne. The final week, spoiler alert, of the Riven's Wishes is to do the Shattered Throne dungeon. So you have a loot incentive to do it, but also the wish incentive there. Prophecy is a free dungeon, so that would be another easy one where a loot refresh would go over really well for completions. That's just available for free.
The last breath? Yeah. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh.
And then that just leaves Pit and the 30th anniversary one, which name is escaping me now, available. Grasp, thank you, which are paid, of course, but still, I mean, I think the Pit of Heresy, the moon weapon's getting a refresh. They've gone through it so many times already. I would still at least make that an easy thing to chase. I don't know.
Oh, I'll happily jump into some Prophecy. That's
high stat dungeon. Armor. I mean, that would be a pretty rewarding activity if we could get a sweet origin trait on those weapons, plus the high stat armor that always drops at the end with the guaranteed spikes of 16. And I mean, again, it wouldn't take a lot for grasp weapons to be meta again or chaseable again. I mean, Ice Loon is a stat monster, so if that thing got an origin trait plus some of the newer PvP perks, I know tons of people would be going back in there for that. That's my guess, but I probably just jinxed us to a Garden of Salvation loot refresh, which we're all fine with. Everyone's fine with. But I don't think it'll be playlist stuff. I think they like to save those updates for like expansion stuff. So I imagine we're probably going to get a pretty big overhaul with Final Shape, and we'll be good.
To be honest, throughout this year, not just this season with like Crux Termination, but we've had a bunch of World Drop and a bunch of like Foundry weapons that have been really like, higher than A tier. Either at A tier or S tier. I mean, we've done various episodes on all of them. So I was originally thinking it would be like a playlist update or even a World Drop kind of refresh, but I'm certainly more on your side now, where maybe it's not Garden of Salvation, maybe it's not Vogue, but it's probably going to be a small selection of dungeons.
Mm-hmm. We'll see.
I have one request. This whole thing that we've just covered right here. If I could get a judgment with frenzy timed payload, I would never unequip it. I don't think
Weapons
I would
team,
ever...
if you're listening,
Yeah.
Saint really wants a refresh judgment.
I never got the demo timed payload, which is the role that I was after for a really long time. I have an ensemble timed payload that I use a good amount, because ensemble gives like some really big stat bumps, and it feels nice. But I just love the look and sound of all those weapons. I would go nuts, just sicko mode for a frenzy timed payload weapon.
The trials of the 9 weapons always looked just great, just fantastic aesthetic, and the prophecy having like attachments to Trials of the 9, and it's such a fun dungeon. It's like I really enjoyed Shattered Throne, didn't really enjoy Pit of Heresy, but Prophecy, when it just came out of nowhere, like Saint and Impetus, you guys were still around there if you were actively playing. That was such a shock just to see a dungeon drop. Like, here you go.
Yeah, day one.
Like,
that was like,
oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, so look forward to that. Whatever they plan to do for the loot refresh, more loot, refresh loot, it's always great to chase around. Next up, we do have some Bungie news. Now, if you've been living under a rock for the last couple, or at least 2 weeks, then this will be a little bit of a surprise, but I think everyone knows by this point. Joe Blackburn, the Destiny 2 game director, will be stepping down and leaving Bungie at the end of February as the final shape enters the, quote, end-to-end playtesting, which is basically the layman's term for the end stage before release for bug fixes, internal feedback, and more. Saint, maybe you can fill us in if you've got any experience with what that necessarily means. But Joe Blackburn will be leaving us. He is being, he's passing the torch over to Bungie veteran Tyson Green, who has been at Bungie since the Myth days. So we're talking decades at this point. Just to give you a little kind of background, he worked as a multiplayer design lead for Halo 3, as one of the game design leads for Destiny 1 and 2, and as various designer and system positions on pretty much everything that Bungie have released since 1998. Tyson will be the game director for post the final shape, including episodes and, quote, future redacted plans. And just to give a little context with Joe, he first joined Bungie in 2015 as a raid designer, then as lead raid designer. So I think he was the creative lead for Last Wish. I think that was one of his. But he also led creatively the Season of Opulence, which I think many of us have been kind of putting it at the top of our like skyscraper to say this was one of the best seasons we've ever had. It's definitely up there in terms of engagement, in terms of loot incentive. It was one of the better of the early seasons anyway. He did leave in 2019 for Riot Games, but then he returned in 2020 and has been Destiny 2's game director since The Witch Queen. So he's seen quite a lot of ups and downs since then. Impetus, what's your thoughts here with Joe leaving Bungie?
I'm disappointed. Well, I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. I'm sad to hear that because he has been the game director for Destiny 2 for the majority of my time playing the game, and I feel like it's been a really solid time. I mean, the Year of Witch Queen saw a lot of great content come out for the first time, or an improvement on content that we already had. So again, like Legendary Campaign, right? That was new to the Witch Queen. That was a big success. I really enjoyed playing that. We also had the Dungeon Pass come out, which dungeons had existed already at that point, but I certainly felt like Duality and Spire were a step up in terms of what dungeons could be, and it definitely felt like, I would definitely say that even more with this year's Dungeon Pass too, in terms of Ghosts and Warlords of Ruin. So, I think he certainly seemed like he was in touch with the average Destiny player, which of course is the kind of player that we want this podcast to really be about. So, it felt nice to hear him be open and talk about things on Twitter, do little videos, the willingness to stream on the official Twitch account for the game. I think he only ends up doing that once, but still, he did at least do one, and he was very humble about everything. Yeah, I mean, he seems like a good guy. I wish him all the best, but I can't be too disappointed looking at Tyson's resume. I mean, goodness sakes, he's been here for everything. Seems like he's had a pretty good idea at the high level, at least, of everything that Destiny has ever been about. Really, game design lead for Destiny 1 and 2 is a pretty big deal. So that's yeah. I hope that he's able to step up and fill the gap that Joe leaves, because it's a very, very large gap for sure. Saint, how do you feel about all this?
Yeah, I'm just sad. I think that's like a good way to put it. And a lot of that comes from just like watching Joe work and play the game like a lot and be really enthusiastic like all the time. And it's really enigmatic and like draws you to somebody that is in a position of authority that is so invested in what they're doing. And I believe that Tyson most recently has been like a systems designer, like lead systems designer. So I definitely see him kind of leading some meetings around like the new things being added to the game or being projected as potential for the game. And I think that some of that will come to light in the final shape, some stuff that like he has been the lead on, which may give him even more credibility. Hard to say how that all has, potentially changed between when I was like there for a few months and now. Obviously it's probably gone through a lot of iterations, but seeing that does give me a lot of hope for seeing Tyson Green head up, coming in to be the lead here. The other thing I was going to say about end-to-end testing that I remember specifically was trying to go through the whole game in a cohesive way, or the whole release in a cohesive way, thinking about is the leveling happening in a way that is lining up with the difficulty stages that we're giving players, and would you be able to level up in such a way that works with the campaign as it's gearing up, and also included several people, like a group of people that were not QA testers. They would bring in people, from like the analytics team. Like I remember that's when I met this guy named David Hostler, who I believe is like a data architect, right, at Bungie, and several other people like that were maybe working on like accessibility or whatever it may have been, and bringing in like a slightly larger but still limited swath of developers and disciplines, and having them all go through the entire main stories and stuff of the release, and kind of giving feedback on it. So that definitely makes me feel like when they talk about the final shape is like getting towards its, polishing stages, also has me wondering if they're doing that right now. They've got a lot of time. They got 4 months, and I think that's interesting because it gives them a lot of time after this like big end-to-end playtest to really act on the feedback. Whereas maybe in other releases, you might have had like a month of actual development time before you need to shift pretty much into just strictly polish and bug fixes and getting ready to ship. Now they could have 2 months or 2.5 months maybe after the end-to-end playtest to make changes and bug fixes and all that stuff like that, which does give me a lot of confidence that whatever is finally released in June really is going to be polished, and like it's getting my expectations like pretty high for what we're going to see in the final shape. So yeah, it's sad to see Joe go. It was easy to see his like passion for Destiny 2, but yeah, Tyson obviously is incredibly vetted. You could not have a stronger resume for a position like this, pretty much.
Yeah, I pretty much share that same sentiment. It's sad to see Joe go, but I think we're in good hands. I mean, I obviously don't want to pick and choose who else could have been the next game director, but like, Tyson's the next best thing, I suppose. And I mean that with every respect to himself and other folks that are at Bungie. But I think I've seen a lot of like doom and gloom from a few folks. I think this is probably the best, the next best natural kind of turning the leaf, turning the page that Joe has led from basically the Witch Queen up to this point, and now it's time for him to kind of, right, I've done as much as I want to do, that I need to do, I think I can't remember where he said it or if this was actually something that he did say, but he did again not something that I want to be like 100% affirmative that this is something he did say, but I read somewhere that he plans to do some streaming playing Destiny post final shape or around about the final shape as just like a player, as a gamer, so not attached to Bungie, not attached to Destiny 2 game director, but as just one of us, and that is something that, like, to highlight, Joe has always been like, you always see him post on social media talking about he's doing his like Fireteam Finder GM runs, or he's just getting a bunch of LFG GM runs. He's posted about playing some dungeons with just randomers on Destiny. He's always been like, at the top level, the game director for the game, but also just playing the game with us. It does feel that like natural aspect. So sad to see him to go, but yeah, I think certainly the natural point is we're entering a completely new era of Destiny. So maybe it's best to get some fresh eyes on it. It's the kind of vibe that I've got.
Another thing I want to say is people are like, oh, well, things are going so bad that Joe Blackburn is leaving Bungie. And I'm like, man, there are so many other things that could be contributing to his like choice for doing this. He's worked on Destiny for like a long time. So if we, 8 years total or something like that between, his like 2015 and now, dude, that's so long to work in the same game. And yeah, I think that you see some of that setting in with developers that have been at Bungie for a long time, moving on to work on new IPs. Like a bunch of people have moved on from Destiny to work on Marathon. And that's not because they hate Destiny. It's because when you work on the same thing for a decade, like, you get tired of it. And there's so many studios have this kind of a problem. I remember listening to a story just this past week about the studio that made the first Halo Wars game was so tired of working on the same RTS franchise for 8 years or 9 years or something like that. Like, every developer gets tired of looking at the same media for a decade, and maybe Joe just wanted to move on to a new type of game or a new studio, or who knows what happened. But just immediately going to, oh, Destiny's so bad that Joe left is like ridiculous. There's so many other things that contribute to this, and like, you got to keep in mind that this is like a guy trying to manage their career. It's not just your game, right? It's not all about Destiny, especially for the people that work in the game. Like, they have their own lives that they're trying to live, and they, don't always work at the same place for their entire career, or sometimes they get tired of games and they want to move on to new ones.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to go down this necessary rabbit hole, especially in this episode. We've got other things to be talking about, but the gaming industry has been very volatile recently, not just at Bungie. Obviously, we saw the layoffs a few months ago, but it's not just Bungie, it's everywhere in the gaming industry. But the reason why I sort of brought that up is, Joe's maybe thought, right, I've done everything that I wanted to do at Bungie. I want to go somewhere else and do something else. And, I can only wish him all the best for that. There's plenty of other studios out there. Bungie's obviously part of Sony. So who knows? He could be going somewhere within Sony to work on some really fantastic games within Sony Productions, within PlayStation, or he could be going somewhere else. Who knows? He'll obviously tell us that, but sometime down the line. But yeah, like, I certainly don't agree with this whole kind of doom and gloom. Yes, it's maybe a worry, considering we're at quite a low period with Destiny and with Bungie, that attachment. But I just think I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. I just see this more of a natural stepping stone than anything else.
Yep. I think those are all great points. Got nothing more to add there. One question I had for you, Saint. When you were working with Lightfall, were you in the end-to-end, or is that actually after your time there, if you can tell us that?
Yeah, I was a part of that for Lightfall.
You were a part of that. So that was, okay, I'm just trying to think of the time frame compared to what you said, how many months came after that end-to-end testing for when Lightfall released compared to how many months are in between the final Shapes release and their end-to-end testing. So they basically had, the entire season of the Seraph to do end-to-end testing, and then a few months after that to kind of capitalize on what needed to be addressed?
Yeah. Pretty much all of season 19 it would have been, I guess. So I mean, honestly, when you put it like that, it really is it's about the same time.
Okay.
But I'm not sure at which point they would switch gears completely from development to strictly like release and triage and polishing, because I don't know how long that they give themselves for that, but I would think that it would be like at least a month and a half of time for like triage and polish exclusively, where it's like
that time came after you stopped working with them.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And they there's that cutoff of like, okay, there are no new more features, there are no new more updates. We are strictly focused on like bug triage and polishing. And I think that's true for pretty much every like major game studio when it comes to releases like this. But there were some really good times. There's a lot of like really cool people that I got to engage with there from various teams and testing things like all the Neomuna public events. We got to test that as a group, and we would like manipulate matchmaking to make sure that it would put us all into the same environments and try out like the Vex incursions and other stuff like that. So yeah, some good times for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into GM, shall we?
Yeah.
It's only 46 minutes in. All right. Psi Ops Cosmodrome is finally here as a Grandmaster Nightfall, and it's an interesting one. I think we were playing this differently than we've played probably every other GM normally, right? Obviously, you can play it a little bit more aggressive depending on what you want to do, but for this one in particular, I think when we were going through it for the first few times, we were really re-strategizing halfway through the run. It's kind of a interesting layout. You got 3 major segments, and then that's it. There's not a whole lot of time in between those segments. Like, it feels very much like you're immediately in the next section after about 10 seconds of moving, 5 seconds of teleporting really from that second area to the third area. So there's not a lot of downtime. You are pretty much go, 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 watch out the entire time here, which makes for a very intense clear if you are going into this completely blind. I don't think I would ever take somebody who's brand new to GMs into this one. This is a very much, you got a few different GM runs under your belt. Let's go have some fun here. I'm sure you could clear it, of course, completely new, but it would be a brutal introduction to what a Grandmaster entails. But this one in particular has Barrier and Unstoppable champions. You will be fighting Fallen and Hive enemies throughout this. So starting, of course, with our Barrier champions, your counters to that on the exotic weapon side would be Arbalest, Ariana's Vow, the Lament, Revision Zero, Wishender. Those 2 we definitely recommend here. And then for Titans on the exotic armor side, you do have the Second Chance gauntlets if you want to return some purple shields of your own. Subclass keywords that interact with Barrier champions: Radiant. Definitely recommend that one. Volatile rounds and Unravel rounds. That is distinct from Volatile and Unravel, the subclass keywords themselves. You need the rounds which are applied to your weapons to pierce a barrier. And then on the mod side, and then again, this will apply to this season only, we do have Anti-Barrier Sidearm, Flint Striker, which is for Radiant procs, Heart of the Flame, also for Radiant procs, and then Unraveling Orbs for the Unravel rounds effect. On the Unstoppable champion side, again, exotic weapons, Bastion, Devil's Ruin, Leviathan's Breath, always a great option in GM's, very, very strong, heavy weapon. Malfeasance, no taken enemies in this one, so you're not going to get that extra damage, but it does have intrinsic unstop. And then the Hunter exotic armor, Athris's Embrace, I always mispronounce that, and then Titans have the Ashen Wake gauntlets. Those are both gauntlets there. Subclass keywords for Unstoppable champions, the Blind, Ignition, definitely a great opportunity for Ignitions this season. The Freeze into the Shatter, another great option. And then Suspend, of course, if you want to be on Strand. For our artifact mods, we do have Unstoppable Bow, Unstoppable Hand Cannon, and then the mods Rays of Precision, which relate to ignitions, and Dragon's Bite, which is helpful for that freeze into shatter or the suspend effect. And as always, remember to check out Court's Champion Counters infographic for a full, exhaustive list of everything listed under each counter category if you're a bit more visual here. But yes, you do have plenty of great options here. I was rocking Arbalest for our clear on the barrier side. And then I had a hand cannon for unstoppable champions. I was rocking Posterity for our clear. Saint, what were you running?
Oh, Polaris Lance.
Yes.
Definitely Polaris Lance, which sounds funny because there's no like scout rifle base interaction, but part of the great part about that we'll talk about in a little bit is because the amount of scorch damage that it deals, it's able to ignite unstoppable champions and stun them. And because it does not have an intrinsic modifier, it will also benefit and do anti-barrier through Radiant. So just really good combo there. Another big part about that is because of our artifact mods. I believe Flint Striker is the one that grants Radiant, or is it Kindling Trigger? I can't remember which one it is, but
Flint Striker is Rapid Solar Weapon Precision Hits and Final Blows grant Radiant.
The way that is calculated, right, is a quarter of the mag rounded down +1. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the spreadsheet.
So the way that works means that Polaris Lance can proc that in 4 bullets. That's pretty fast. So yeah, Polaris Lance all the way.
Yeah, so precision hits trigger for Radiant, it's 25% of the magazine size +1, and then it's rounded down. So, yeah.
There you have it.
Pretty simple.
What were you rocking for your champion counters on weapon side?
So, I'm just revisiting. Yeah, so I had Wave Splitter. I'll talk about Wave Splitter in a minute here. Mm-hmm. But I also had Fatebringer for Hand Cannon Unstoppable. And then I think it was more like the focus was for more you guys were focused on the champions. I was more focused on everything else except champions. But you know, Wave Splitter's more for Overload, so it wasn't really it wasn't for champions at this thing. It was for one of the other quote champions of this of this strike, which we'll talk about shortly. But yeah, Fatebringer. I don't think I had volatile rounds, even though I was running Night Stalker. I didn't have Gerfalcons. I had Orpheus Rig instead. But you could go down that route, and I'll talk about that Void Hunter Night Stalker build shortly as well.
Yes, 100%. We do have all 3 shields present in this, all 3 of the light-based shields, I should clarify, in this GM Arc, Solar, and Void. Arc is by far the most common. You have in the beginning part with the fallen enemies, fallen captains are in Arc, and then later on you'll also get Hive Knights with Arc shields. Solar shields, wizards, Hive wizards do appear with that, and then I'm struggling to remember the void shields. Was it just barrier? It wasn't. It would have been barrier. It would have been normal servitors. Was there a void shield servitor? Because
I think it was a void shield server, or there was maybe a few like void shield acolytes.
Okay,
I know
it's like only a few. Sometimes I feel like
it was not. Certainly not the primary shield.
And it must have been in the first area, because there definitely weren't void shields in the second room or the third area. So you'll get the void ones kind of out of the way pretty quickly, but Arc is by far the most common and did actually end up affecting what I ran for my subclass and build, but we'll cover that in a bit here. Saint, what are our activity modifiers?
We are going to have Void Threat, which is usually the matching attack of the boss, which in this case is a shield throw, which we'll be talking about plenty. And you'll probably see some, some suppressor grenades,
or a Nova Bomb. Really just anything,
whatever he may be. There'll definitely be a clip at some point in here that we'll talk about of us getting wiped by a single shield throw, and then at one point me thinking that I had jumped over the shield throw and then it bouncing off the wall behind me and then hitting me in the back and killing me in one shot, which was pretty great. Luckily, Impetus held it down and got the revives on that one. But yeah, Void Threat, 50% increase there. We have Stasis and Solar Surges. It's a 25% buff to the outgoing damage, but keep in mind that this will not stack with your other overcharge weapon modifiers. For overcharge weapons, we have 25% buff to the outgoing damage. That, again, does not stack with those elemental buffs, but could be used in place of them. That would include kinetic weapons when your subclass element is matching one of those activity, stasis, or solar surges. We have any artifact champion weapon counter mods, so unstoppable bow, so to say, no matter what element you're running, would get that overcharge buff. And then our specialization origin trait perks that are active, including Sundering from Warlord's Ruin, nano munitions from our offensive weapons, nano tracer rockets from Neomuna, noble deeds from season 20, unsated hunger from 21, head rush from 22, which would include the eremite and semiotician, and then finally dragon's vengeance, obviously scatter signal, doomed petitioner, penance, all that stuff, scalar potential, all included in that stuff. Scatter signal is a personal favorite because of some of those artifact mods that you can also benefit from. And then finally, overcharged shotgun.
Go for it.
Don't worry about that one too much. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really know about that, but it is there. By all means, if you want to use tractor cannon, pop off. It will suppress, and it's just a bit of a risky play. We have some noteworthy enemies. The mini-boss Brig that will appear just about in the first quarter of the GM there, at the kind of halfway through that payload section. The Lucent Hive Witch, which is at the end of the payload section, can suppress them. It's a boss here, so they can't be suspended or anything like that. And then Savathun's Projections, which can only be damaged by the Synaptic Spear, as well as our final boss that will be the Acolyte Titan type of Hive Lucent breed. Looking at some recommended weapons, I'll start off with a couple here. Actually, I'll start for the first one, and I'll pass you over to Court for the second one here. I mentioned Polaris Lance, Flint Striker, Raise of Precision, Kindling Trigger, just an obscene amount of consistent damage. You can deal up to 60 Scorch stacks per perfect fifth shot, and that means that if you throw a grenade, let's say, onto a unstoppable champion, or you have another fire teammate that happens to be using some kind of solar ability, you could land one perfect fifth shot on them each, or a grenade and one perfect fifth shot, and they're going to ignite and chain that ignition. Incredibly powerful. And also, Court has spoken a lot in the past about the hierarchy of champion effects. So it's actually very important here that this does not have an innate effect to it, or a native effect from the artifact, because it is going to allow those ignitions to trigger the unstoppables or to stun them, as well as the radiance to pierce those barriers. Second up is Wave Splitter, which I believe was Impetus's idea in the first place, but Court ended up capitalizing on it. Court, why would you want to use Wave Splitter?
So, even though we don't have overload champions, and that was one of the big kind of question marks when, Impetus mentioned it, and I was thinking, it has suppression. That's the big kind of plus. That's like the S tier part of Wave Splitter. But because there's no other synergy with this specific strike, it doesn't have any overloads. So like you're using a weapon, but it's not for champions, which is the main draw for Grandmasters. However, because we were getting a bit kind of frustrated, we're getting, our asses handy to us by the first wizard, but also mainly by the end boss, which is a Lucent Hive. We're thinking, right, we can't crowd control, we don't have suspend, we can't blind them, we can't freeze them. Bosses can get frozen, but they instantly shatter out of it. You can't pin them in place. The only other thought process here was suppression. And I think it's maybe something that we could maybe revisit in the future, but Lucent Hive can be suppressed out of their super, regardless if they're mini-boss tier or if they're boss tier. That is a thing. It's like in PvP. If you get suppressed out of your super, you're taken completely out of it. But it's obviously more prevalent here in PvE because, these Lucent Hive have got like 1 million intellect, so they can cast their super all the time. So that was an important aspect, and we're thinking, right, which kind of suppression aspects do we have? We've got obviously Tether for Hunter, we've got Shield Bash, maybe not really a great play for Titans, don't want to be up close and personal with a Lucent Hive on a Grandmaster. We've got suppression grenades ourselves, but suppression grenades are fairly, they're kind of middling tier in terms of cooldown. If you miss that suppression grenade, it's pretty much all over. So we're looking at more weapon types. We've got tracked cannon. Again, it's quite a close range option. We've got two-tailed fox for that kind of triple synergy for scorch, suppression, and jolt. You've got ruinous FJ to spawn a transmutation sphere. Again, you need to dunk that close. So you're down to really two options here. If you didn't want to use two-tailed fox with it being a heavy option. Collective obligation, which I'll talk about during one of my builds, but Wave Splitter, which is a very solid option for applying suppression, but also, it's just a great weapon in terms of power potential. So the idea here was to have someone, not necessarily the person using Wave Splitter, although they can absolutely do it themselves, but to have someone, in my case, it was Saint, to just basically print orbs, and obviously yourself to use Wave Splitter, which gives them constant suppression, and especially with the boss, you can just pin them down, because that's the important aspect when it comes to the boss fight in this GM, is when he pops his super, is when it can all go to shit. But if you can pin them down, if you can keep them out of their super, very manageable. Such an easy boss just to pin down. But the moment he's in his super, it just gets completely thrown out the window. So Wave Splitter is our kind of second pick. Whoever second or the third person to use Wave Splitter, Saint here was using Polaris Lance and just printing out orbs. So it was just perfect synergy here.
And what's the number of seconds that you need to be firing for that to take effect? Because that was the part that I didn't know when I made this suggestion initially, and then you told me, I was like, oh, that's actually a lot faster than I thought it was.
Yeah, so Wave Splitter's got that whole kind of oscillation kind of thing when you're holding down the trigger, but that's kind of regardless. When you pick up an orb of power, it grants supercharged battery for 10 seconds. It refills the magazine, which is another great aspect of Wave Splitter, just having instant refills without having to reload. And obviously that buff duration maxes out for 20 seconds. It sets the power level to high, so you're basically doing up to almost 70% damage increase. But the important aspect here with what Impetus is asking me here is dealing sustained damage for 2 seconds applies suppression for 7 seconds. And you can keep refreshing that. You can effectively pin down an enemy. You don't necessarily have to do that, just to save on ammo to keep the reserves up on Wave Splitter. But 7 seconds, keep reapplying it. You're just pinning down the boss. It's very simple. Again, I'll talk about collective obligation when it comes to one of my hunter builds. That could be an alternative, but I think with how much power Wave Splitter has, it's been a favourite trace rifle of mine. It's one of my favourite trace rifles, just under Agar Scepter. But this was like big brain play, and thank you, Impetus, for suggesting this.
Yeah, such a big brain play that I didn't even put orb generating mods on my helmet when we ended up running it. So that's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of a thing there. Other weapon recommendations that we do have on the exotic side here, Wicked Implement. It's not going to be as potent as Polaris Lance, but you can also utilize the Radiant and the slow into freeze into shatter effect. So that can still be quite nice. Skyburner's Oath, again, dealing Scorch. I would still say Polaris is going to be far and away the better option there for that exotic perk, but you do have another solar exotic scout. Malfeasance again for the unstop, and dealing good damage against the boss target as you keep landing those explosive slugs. But what we found was the Lucent Hive have all their abilities set to tier 1 million, so they are recharging very quickly. Malfeasance will unfortunately encounter on both the Wizard and the Titan some sort of blockage. In the case of the wizard, the healing rift, which was very annoying to deal with. But in the case of the actual boss of the GM, the barricade gets placed down immediately, and that will stop malfeasance dead in its tracks if you're trying to keep that sustained damage up. So I would probably push people more towards some sort of barrier exotic, like Wish Ender in particular, going to be very strong. I ended up running Arbalest for our successful clear for that reason of I could still damage the boss with a hard-hitting weapon through the barricade whenever that enemy would put it up. You could also do Wishkeeper. Again, that's more for the leaning into the suspend side of things. That would be very nice for, I think, that second room in particular. You could throw that tangle down and really trap enemies as they run into that room. Again, it's your call there. I would still, again, lean to Wish Ender over Wishkeeper, but there's still, if the unstops are giving you trouble, that would be a really great way to lean into suspending. Arbalest, as I already mentioned, again, really great for longer distances and dealing good damage against all the shields that you encounter, as well as the Barricade Titan, and for the Servitors, and then also the Barrier Knights in the final room. Leviathan's Breath, again, very great. Going to be great against the unstops. Going to be great to take out the two Shriekers, as well as deal a lot of damage and immediately override the Healing Rift on that Hive Wizard. And then Dragon's Breath, I started out with Dragon's Breath when we were first doing some runs. I was missing too many shots when I needed to be landing them. Again, enemies just dodge out of the way, or, I wouldn't stick the rocket, but the fire would do a little bit of damage. So I ended up swapping over to Apex Predator, which is a legendary solar rocket launcher, and then saved my exotic slot for Arbalest to deal with those servitors. But again, the ad clearing aspect of Dragon's Breath could be very helpful in the second room in particular, and also the third room too, if you can angle your shots just right. But there's also that as well. Legendary side, again, I think on the heavies, it's either linear fusions or rocket launchers. So you kind of pick whatever you feel most comfortable with. Again, I was running Apex Predator, but if you want to do linear fusion rifle, Briar's Contempt would be really strong there. You probably could, I didn't know this, but I didn't test this at least. You probably could proc Surrounded pretty easily in that final boss room. Definitely in the second room, even if you're sitting out in that hallway, you'd have Surrounded up all the time, which would allow you to melt things pretty quickly. So that is an option. Saint, you were using Scatter Signal at one point, and then I also know you were using Pardon Our Dust, and you both spoke pretty highly of those effects, those weapons effects. What did you end up clearing with? Was it Pardon Our Dust that you had for the successful run?
I went to Scatter Signal because it let me do some burst damage up close, which Polaris Lancy's not good at. Right. So Scatter Signal was really nice, and I was also using Slice on Scatter Signal, which I typically am like an overload guy, but I switched just like before we had started running as GM, and that was actually really nice because you can barricade, tag like an unstoppable champion with it, a barrier champ, boss, whatever it is, with the Sever, and then also at the same time proc your the burst trait that is escaping.
The controlled burst.
Control burst, yes, thank you. Don't get me wrong, Partner Dust is great for like slowing things down and crowd controlling, but you were on stasis there, and you were already doing so much crowd control on your own that I was like, I'm just going to switch to Scatter Signal so I can do a little more damage. Impetus has got the crowd control and all that stuff locked down. So yeah, I think that if you have some stasis in your team, there's no need for that. If you're all running offensive classes, the Blinding GL like stays good. Like it's been, overlooked in some cases, I feel like, because there's so many other good things out there. But yeah, having the ability to slow down and control a room just a little bit, if you're all like on a more offensive classes, is always strong.
Court, do you have any other weapons that you would recommend before we pivot over to subclasses and builds?
No, I think, again, I like to link my weapon choice to whatever the surge is, and obviously we did this when it was stasis and solar surge. Maybe different if you do it. I'm not sure how the rotation works now with the GMs, or if it's going to be completely different in the future. But I was using Storm Chaser, and that was mainly for the shields. It was a bit weird to pick a heavy LFR, but again, I was not really using it for damage. I was using Wave Splitter for the damage aspect. If I needed to use my hand cannon or whatever was in my primary slot, I would use that just to kind of bring kind of tick damage on a few enemies. But the LFR was what I was using just to bring down some of the arc shields. Otherwise, it was something like Commemoration was my next choice, or a heavy machine gun, which is tied to one of the elements for solar or for stasis.
I definitely was using Shoot to Loot for one of the runs, and that was so helpful for the second room and the third room, because you do get pinned down, especially in that final room. You don't have a lot of space to move. You can kind of peek out and stuff, and it was very frustrating to not be able to go pick up bricks as easily. So if you are wanting to run a Shoot to Loot weapon, again, we've got Unstoppable Hand Cannon and Unstoppable Bow. Raconteur, which is craftable from Season 20, gets Shoot to Loot in Calm 3. We do also have one of our GM bows, the Brios Psionics 4, that rolls with it. Strident Whistle, which is also dropping from GMs. I mean, that's a great option. On the hand cannon side, our Dreaming City one actually does roll with that. That's Waking Vigil. That's the most recent one. You've also got Crisis Inverted and Pure Poetry, or Vulpecula if you want to go way back to our Stasis 180 options there. That perk really shines in this GM when you do not have the freedom of movement that you might have in other Grandmaster Nightfalls. So can't recommend that perk enough, because you do not want to be pinned down and not have ammo and be forced to do an ammo run when you're the last Guardian standing, which may or may not happen to you when you go to complete this. All right, Court, should we pivot over to the builds? What are the goods here for our abilities, our pairings? What do we got?
Yeah, let's go. So for Hunters, obviously I've been hyping up Void subclass. Again, I like to synergize with elements, with the active surge, but you can absolutely bring this in. You may miss out on the 25%, but you could probably get that from some of the overcharges. But anyway, Void subclass for Hunters, it's either Deadfall or Mobius. Both are good. Deadfall probably the better option if you're going to go down one of the exotic recommendation routes I'll suggest here. Either Vortex or Suppressor. I was running Vortex with Remnants during my run, but Suppressor's definitely your best kind of backup option. Obviously, you only have Snare Bomb as a melee. You've got Gambler's Dodge. This is where the sort of the main tree kind of branches off into three. You've got Orpheus Rig for your kind of heavy support exotic. There's a lot of ads in tight areas. I mean, you can really utilize Deadfall Tether with like 200% efficiency. You'll get your super back really fast. You have Falcon's Hauberk, which is excellent with either Collective Obligation or Wave Splitter. Or you can go Omnioculus. Omnioculus isn't something I use a lot. I have just personal preference. I'm not a fan of Omnioculus, but I completely understand that people enjoy using it. Get your kind of Trapper's Ambush smoke bomb back pretty much constantly. You get it back if you cast 2 or more people in Invis, plus you get an extra charge as well. You get DR on top of that when you're invisible. Again, I'm not big on Omnioculus, but it's certainly there for those that prefer a more safer play. Coordinate with your team to say, right, I'm going to pop everyone in Invis and then kind of retreat to a much safer spot, especially in this GM. Another branching path here, as I've mentioned, Wave Splitter, but Collective Obligation is your kind of next option. I'll go into some small details kind of versus Wave Splitter in a moment here. You've got Stylus Executioner, and you can either go Trapper's Ambush or Vanishing Step. It's very free, whatever kind of suits your playstyle here. Trapper's Ambush would obviously be a lot better with Omnioculus for that, getting your invis back really fast. For fragments, you've got Echoes of Domineering, you've got Starvation, you've got Vigilance, and Remnants. Only use Remnants if you're using Vortex, otherwise you can use something like Cessation, which is great use with your Falcons. Cessation is your finishers apply volatility to enemies within a few meters, but it's the second part, which is killing enemies affected by volatile spawns of Void Breach. You can see where I'm probably going with this, so it's great with your Falcons. You can just keep reapplying volatility to spawn a Void Breach, to pick up for Starvation, to get Devour. Domineering also has that, where you get a few bonuses. It's like 30 mobility, a little faster forward movement speed for 10 seconds, and it refills your readied weapon. But you also spawn Void Breaches through Suppression. And then you have Vigilance, which I've pretty much locked onto every Void subclass build that I have, because upon killing an enemy while at critical health, you get a Void Overshield. So it's just that kind of last stand kind of moment there with Vigilance. So you get that for 5 seconds, or it's 7.5 seconds if you've got the extension fragment on as well. As for mods, pretty free here. I'm not really going to recommend anything too specific here. You've got your Siphon mods, but as I mentioned earlier, it's probably better for other teammates. You've got 2 teammates in this GM. Get them to print some orbs for you. You can fill in your helmet slot with whatever you want, but if you can free up, if you've got the freedom to put on Siphons, then that's absolutely cool to do. Collective Obligation and Wave Splitter can certainly spawn orbs for you. You have Firepower, Grenade Kickstart, and Impact Induction, just to really bring up your grenades, to have that pretty much up all the time. I have mentioned before, for the chest armor mods, you can go down Resists, which is what I recommend, but I was using double Void Reserves for Wave Splitter because I did not want to run out of ammo. So I didn't mention this to Saint and Impetus. Maybe they inspected me before we went, but I think I had one resist. It was concussive dampener, but there was nothing else other than reserve mods. Surges for legs, if you can spare them, and for class you've got Reaper, another way to spawn an Orb of Power, and then Time Dilation, just to kind of keep your stacks of armor charge up for Grenade Kickstart. In terms of specific weapons, I already mentioned them. I was using Storm Chaser, but it was for the Arc Shields, or you could go down the route of Commemoration, just kind of beam down those bunch of ads that you'll be seeing. So, like I said, this is branched into like kind of 3 paths. You can go Orpheus Reg, you can go your Falcons, or you can go Omnioculus. I was using Orpheus Reg. I could definitely come back in and use your Falcons, because that would be a really great synergy with Cessation, especially using Collective Obligation. And obviously you've got Omnioculus if that's something you prefer. In terms of suppression output, so I mentioned Wave Splitter. After picking up an Orb of Power, Wave Splitter hits really hard. After sustained fire of 2 seconds, it applies that suppression. But in terms of sustainability, can be a little bit more advanced, and it does require you or your fire team, ideally the latter, to be spawning orbs and being pretty aggressive. We were playing pretty aggressive at some points. And as a reminder, and Saint, you mentioned this earlier on about different weapons kind of accepting different champion counters. Wave Splitter cannot accept volatile rounds or Radiant. You will not be able to use Wave Splitter for anything but Overload champions, and that's just with how the counter hierarchy works. Suppression is built into Wave Splitter's exotic trait, which puts it in the sort of middle tier for hierarchy. So you will not be able to use Radiant, you'll not be able to use volatile rounds or anything else at this stage to combat other champions. So that's the big kind of asterisk when it comes to Wave Splitter. Alternatively, you could go Collective Obligation. I really enjoy using Collective Obligation. I was going to use that if I wasn't kind of feeling Wave Splitter, but Wave Splitter certainly was doing some really great work. It's likely that it's going it's likely going to be the easiest to sustain suppression versus Wave Splitter if your team aren't as aggressive, because the thing with Wave Splitter, you can just apply it, you can gather your suppression, your volatility and weaken, swap to the alt charge modes, fire it onto the boss, and then before the alt charge mode runs out, fire again. You'll siphon all those mods back. Sorry, I should say after the alt charge mode falls off, you've applied it. You can pick up and siphon all those mods back, and you'll have it back onto your collective obligation. As long as you can keep that loop up, you'll have that kind of infinite suppression, which is very simple and easy to apply on a much bulkier target. And it's going to be really easy. You will not be able to kind of miss with that. Just make sure you've applied all those 3 effects at the end of the alt charge mode. So you can then pick it up after the alt charge mode elapses. So 2 really great choices there. I would pick either. I was really loving Wave Splitter. Saint was printing out orbs for me, so I could quickly run in, use my invis, run in, pick up an orb. The boss at the end, charge it up to super. I can just 2 seconds apply. 2 seconds on paper seems a lot, but it's not really in game. There's a lot of stuff happening, and then he's out of super. So pretty simple. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you were also sitting back pretty far from the boss. So typically when the boss would pop super and you didn't have an angle, the boss would come towards Saint, and then you would be able to just apply those 2 seconds without even having the aggro on, which I thought was a really smart move.
Yep. So you're playing this pretty safely. I tend to recommend a lot of builds, especially Void Hunter, to be a lot more aggressive, to be like the front line compared to the back line. But this is very kind of support build. It's more on an auxiliary. You're more kind of the sort of the artillery aspect here, where you're back of the room. Where I was standing was the left side, where one of the podiums, the platforms, where one of the Synaptic Spears spawns. That's where I was, pretty safe. You could get quite a nice angle looking at the boss, and a lot of the ads they spawn below you, but you've got a nice kind of angle. It's pretty high up that they tend to not kind of snipe you down. You can kind of crouch, or you can retreat back a little bit. So that's where I was standing, and Wave Splitter. Again, Collective Obligation would be really good there as well. If we were to redo this run to kind of do a perfected run, I would probably go in with Collective Obligation just to really test it. It could be a lot easier to sustain versus Wave Splitter. But if you've got teammates that can print out orbs for you, then Wave Splitter's your go-to. One of the first couple runs I did use Stasis subclass. I won't go into any detail here. I've talked about this before. It's one of my frozen battlefield Stasis Hunter builds. Can do really well in this strike, but I think we just need a little bit more kind of focus on how can we deal with the Lucent Hive. They were the main kind of problems that we were dealing with. It wasn't really capitalizing on ad clearing. It wasn't controlling a bunch of ads. It wasn't crowd controlling ads or anything like that. It was definitely the big kind of issue we were having was the end boss, which is why I pivoted to the Void Hunter. But Stasis subclass, I know Impetus, you were using Stasis Warlock. You can go into more detail with that, but Stasis Hunter has absolutely got some room to exploit in this GM as well. But you can find that build, the Stasis Hunter build, on the Discord build section on DMB. The Void Hunter, it's kind of split into 3, but I've got 2 builds which are very similar to the Void subclass build that I've talked about, and I think one of them does use Collective Obligation, if I can remember. But yeah, it's a really great build. I was having a lot of fun. It's very different playstyle compared to most of my builds, but it won't do you wrong. And honestly, if you're having any sort of problems with Lucent Hive, especially the boss, get that suppression in. That will be big brain play. It's the lifesaver, because the first couple runs we were getting lit up by that shield. And I'm sure Saints probably put it in this the YouTube video, but there is one clip where we got triple killed by a shield, and that was great.
Yeah,
all right, Saint, you could maybe fill us in with that particular clip, but what have the Titans got?
Yeah, for the Titans, I'm going to be recommending Solar. Now, Strand is still plenty strong. We've got a couple, good Strand artifact mods. And I think that your Horde Shuttle and Unraveling Orbs and Dragon's Bite are all pretty strong. Abeyant Leap and Synthos, obviously, still a really strong kit. We talked about that a lot, though. So let's talk about the kind of the fun thing for this season, being Solar. I'm going to be using Burning Maul, going with Incendiary Grenade because it just applies a really large amount of Scorch stacks really quick. Using Throwing Hammer for a little bit of up close work in case I get caught up in that situation. And then class ability, I'm probably going Tall Wall unless yourself and your teammates are using rockets, in which case I would definitely recommend Small Wall just to avoid any unnecessary deaths. Not that I would ever step in front of my teammates as they're shooting a rocket or anything like that, but if that had happened, I might feel pretty bad. For my exotic armor, I was using Precious Scars, and I like Precious Scars because it's like a team utility kit. You're providing restoration to your teammates in bursts like pretty frequently whenever you're getting a lot of kills with your matching weapon. In this case, Polaris Lance obviously is our go-to choice here. You can also use Lurley. Lurley's classic. It's a little bit more of a defensive play than kind of an offensive play. Still very strong. Still really great survivability kit. I've just been enjoying using Precious Scars a lot this season, and I'm using a very heavy solar focused loadout, so it plays into that a lot. For my aspects, I'm going to be using Soul Invictus for those sunspots, and then Roaring Flames to make sure that I'm getting a lot of damage out of my Burning Maul when I'm using that. Being able to shut down some of those areas with Burning Maul is really key. You can have your super up, honestly, pretty quickly. Burning Maul does have a slightly slower cooldown, or shorter cooldown than Hammer of Soul, so 1 tier down. And just generally can put out a lot of damage even without using anything like Syntheseps or Pyrogale. For my fragments, I was going with Solus for increased duration to my Radiance and Restoration, Empyrean for Final Blows, extending the duration of those buffs, Ashes for the increased Scorch stacks, allowing me to do up to 60 with my perfect 5th shots from Polaris Lance, getting easier ignitions for my abilities and such. And then finally, Char, Ignition's Spread Scorch, which is going to help out a lot for those big chain ignition kills when you're dealing with some dense enemy areas. Between Solus, Empyrean, the artifact mods, and Precious Scars, you can have Radiance and Restoration all the way up to 15-second timers. You're getting extensions on those every time you get a kill with Empyrean. It's just incredibly effective, right? Your uptime is ridiculously high, and the slightly increased uptime can help you maintain those buffs in between some larger targets, which sometimes you have to deal with, obviously, in a GM. The armor set that I'm using here, obviously some Siphon mods on my helmet. I was using Font of Wisdom to help get my intellect up. I think I run a base of like tier 4 or 5 because it's not really a stat I focus in, but I'm also using 2 Solar Surge mods as well as a recuperation on my boots. So Font of Wisdom, I believe, is giving 3 tiers, taking me from like a 4 to a 7 on the intellect, which is pretty nice just to get that extra little bit of cooldown. Ashes to assets on my helmet, as well as firepower on my arms for orbs and extra super energy when I get grenade kills. I was using shield break charge on my arms for anytime I would break a solar shield with Polaris Lance. It would give me armor charge, as well as fastball to really just be chucking those grenades. Resist mods on the chest piece. And then finally on the class item, Reaper, Time Dilation, and Powerful Attraction, which is just a ridiculously strong trio of mods. A longer buff duration, more orbs after you use your class ability, and gather your orbs from within like a 12 to 15 meter radius every time you pop the class ability. On the artifact mods front, I was also using our Horde Shuttle and Unraveling rounds, and that way when I would switch to my Scatter Signal to deal with some targets up close or take some out, some things like that, you can generate a few Threadlings, you can unravel some targets, and I could sever them, obviously, with the Slice on Scatter Signal. Really strong combo there. In our run, I was also using Briars. Briars plays into that artifact mod Solar Set really well, but I think Apex, Predator is also incredibly strong option. Bait and switch, explosive light, bipod, it's all good all around. Yeah, I mean that's about it for the Titan. Pretty much again, my job was I'm using my class ability. I'm sitting in the back. I'm just doing as much damage as I can with my Briars and my Polaris Lance, trying to generate those orbs while, Cord and Impetus do a lot of that crowd control, holding things down, freezing them in place for me so I can just hit a bunch of crits in a row. Really awesome synergy there. Things are just getting frozen. They're volatile, they're suppressed, they're ignited. It was all coming together. All right. Impetus. Warlocks, what's the look?
Yeah, I bounced around for a few things here. I did start out on Stasis. That's the one that I'll probably recommend the most here. Pretty standard turret kit here with Osmiomancy gloves, but yeah, using that Bleak Watcher aspect to its fullest extent. Did also, of course, have Glacial Harvest on. Really, really helpful for those Stasis shards, getting that energy back. And then for my fragments, I want to Whisper of Torment for grenade energy anytime I take damage from targets. That seems like a pretty no-brain pick there for a GM. Whisper of Conduction to make those Stasis shards come back to my position. Very helpful when I get locked down. And then Rhyme, of course, so once I do pick up those Stasis shards, I get that teeny tiny amount of overshield. Didn't notice that a whole lot, but again, I will take the extra health when I can get it. And I, of course, was generating a ton of shards, so why not? And then, of course, Whisper of Durance to make those turrets all the more annoying with my slow lasting longer. So that was the kit there, of course. Osmiomancy gloves just really making the cold snap grenades a lot better. I actually was alternating between turret and cold snap so that I could really kind of game my grenade ability energy gains there. Turrets, of course, were the ones that were really effective, but for just needing to stop an enemy advance right away, or also just when a spawn happened and a wave of enemies came in, throwing that cold snap grenade down in that second room in particular was awesome for getting a bunch of enemies frozen right away, and then dealing damage with my weapons was very, very helpful there. So that was a really, really helpful play. Then on my mod side here, heavy ammo finder always glued to my helmet. Don't really have anything else specific. Of course, I should have been running siphon mods, but I did forget that for my stasis ones. But yes, definitely weapon siphons, because you are not going to be dealing or generating orbs from your abilities on stasis. So you absolutely need to run weapon siphon mods there. Then on the arms, I did throw fastball on there, grenade kickstart, and bolstering detonation. I also kind of came to the same realization as Court that resistance mods, particularly void resistance mods, were not going to be of great effect in here because the sources of void damage, particularly in the final room, are so great that you will die regardless of the resistances. The shields will one-shot you, and your mods are not going to make much of a difference. Well's not going to make much of a difference there. The aspects of Savathun throwing out a Nova Bomb is a one-shot, and if it somehow isn't a one-shot, remember it will suck you in. So if you're on the cusp of it and you get taken to half health, you do have to immediately run away from it because you will get sucked into it, and I think we did die to that in some aspects. Again, the unstop beam from the ogre is a pretty immediate death if you do not have cover near you. So void resistance there isn't going to be huge. You want to make sure they are, of course, stunned before you have to deal with the eye of death. Really, the only thing I think a void resist would be super helpful for would be shriekers, which only show up in the very end of that first area. And again, you can see them for some time before they open up. So what we were doing, of course, as a fire team is calling out as soon as they opened up and then just immediately blasting them to death. So I don't even think they got a shot off, really, the run that we did end up clearing it successfully because we had killed them so fast. And then the suppressor grenade, which, yeah, I guess you can live the suppressor grenade if it does land near you, but you're still going to be suppressed, which is the more immediate threat, really, than having your health taken to half or living with a sliver. Is you're now without abilities, and you're still probably running for cover at that point anyways. So I did like Court. I put on Concussive Dampener, and then I think I had Reserve mods on, and that was about it. Or actually, no, I think I might have pivoted to an Arc Resist, actually, for combating most of the damage coming from both the fallen enemies and then the Arc, and then the Hive Acolytes as well. So that's what I ran for resistances for both Stasis and then the other element that I ended up pivoting to. Legs, I had the Holy Trinity Recuperation, Better Already, and Innervation there just to make sure my health is fine and I'm getting a little bit of grenade energy when I did pick up one of Saint's Orbs. I ran Time Dilation and then Double Bomber on my class item, again for Stasis. And that's really what I would recommend for most people going into this. I did end up pivoting to Arc, of all things, and that was mostly to combat the number of Arc shields. Again, that was just a big nuisance, and it didn't need to be a nuisance for us in particular. So I got that on, and I ended up running my Cold Heart build, where I was just generating ionic traces with Fallen Sunstar. That made it really helpful. That also allowed my abilities to be more lethal, so I was able to actually put on firepower there so that my grenade final blows could create orbs of power. Again, that was very helpful for Court. The 1 to 2 times that did proc when I still forgot my weapon siphon mods there in my helmet. But the other thing too, of course, with the Arc Kit is the Arc Souls. And the really nice thing about the Arc Souls is that they target the moths that spawn, and those buggers are extremely annoying to deal with in the amounts that they appear in this GM. That really did make crowd control a little bit more difficult. Again, the reason I still recommend Stasis is that Stasis is just going to ignore whether or not the enemy has an overshield and still apply slow all the same. So I was able to crowd control and ignore the Hive moths, but on Arc, when I didn't slow them, when I had to crowd control kind of through killing them, it became a big problem. So the Arc Soul was kind of there just to shoot at the moths as it was floating around, going from enemy to enemy. And then I had my actual grenade and melee abilities with my weapons to kill enemies and pop shields immediately, take care of that. So again, the Arc kit here real quick. Chaos Reach, very helpful for a kind of long distance burst damage. Very helpful in that first encounter, or first part of the encounter in particular. Arc Soul, of course, for casting the Rift and giving that to my teammates as they ran through. Electrostatic Mind for the Ionic Traces, getting that ability regeneration back faster. Spark of Shock to give my Arc Grenades Jolt, of course. Just absolutely stuck to every single Arc build I have. Beacons, when I'm amplified, my Arc Special Weapons create a Blinding Explosion. That was for Cold Heart in particular. Spark of Magnitude to make my lingering Arc Grenades, and I run Storm for extended duration, and then Amplitude to rapidly defeat enemies while I'm amplified, gives me an Orb of Power. That was very, very helpful there. So yes, it was Cold Heart, and then I ended up running a hand cannon in my kinetic slot for the Unstopped Champions at some points, and then I did swap to Arbalist, and then swap over to Posterity as my Arc weapon of choice. And I can't remember what I swapped out my Spark of Beacons fragment for at that point. I need to double check that off the top of my head. But then on my helmet, I did have Ashes to Assets. Again, lethal grenades here, giving myself some bonus super energy. And then on my arms, I was running Firepower, Impact Induction, and Fastball again. And the exotic, of course, was Fallen Sunstar to make my Ionic Traces just a little bit juicier. And then Concussive Dampener on the chest, and then Reserves. And then on the legs, the same set of leg armor, Recuperation, Innervation, and Better Already. And then I was doing Time Dilation, Double Bomber, again, on the class item. So I think that could be a little bit helpful. Again, if you need to be a bit more aggressive, especially if you're running with a fireteam member that has Wave Splitter and needs those Orbs of Power, Arc would be very helpful there for, again, when you pop one Arc shield, there's a good chance you'll have another Arc shielded enemy nearby, and that will create a chain explosion there of extra damage, allow you to throw out abilities, do a little bit more damage with the weapons after they've already taken that shield pop damage there. That was very helpful. So yeah, Stasis is my top pick, but if you're finding that the shields are just annoying and the Arc Moths in particular are kind of slowing you down, do consider Arc. I do not recommend Solar Warlock here. I think Well is going to be a trap in that final room, particularly the aspects of Savathun and the Lucent Titan will have an absolute field day with you if you and your fire team decide to camp in a particular spot in well. They will melt you. Even if you want to go to that very far back platform and pop well, you're going to be in for a very long run, and we don't ever recommend long runs when you can be smart and safe at the same time, and that's just safe at the cost of being smart. So Stasis, number 1 pick there. Go get Osmios if you don't have a good set of those, and go have fun out there, Warlocks.
I should also highlight that Well of Radiance does kind of resist a lot of things. Freeze, you get DR, you get a lot of health all at once. It doesn't resist suppression. You can be suppressed while in a well, which is not great. Because suppression, strips all your kind of UI. You can't cast anything. You can only use your weapons. You can't double jump. So it becomes quite a problem. Yes, you're inside a well, but you've lost a lot of what makes your Guardian powerful.
Yes. Fun things that we learn in PvP and are now starting to learn in PvE with the kind of enemies that we're fighting.
This is not great.
Oh no, I'm in danger.
No wonder suppression isn't really a lot of, it's not on a lot of attributes in the game. Because it'd be pretty annoying to deal with in PvP. All right. We have some pain points and sort of good to know tips for this activity. Quite a lot of notes here. So I'll kick us off here. So at the start, it's payload escort. And really, I think with a lot of GMs that we've done over the last couple of years, we always say it's be conservative, be safe. But this is the one kind of exclusion here. This is the one where you want to be really fast at escorting the payload because it starts to snowball. And the reason why it starts to snowball is because you keep getting constant spawning fallen snipers. You got a lot of fallen that just spawn everywhere, whether it's the left side platform or it's the right side. They do stop spawning after a certain trigger once the payload gets to, I think it's just over halfway after the brig, but this is one where you just want to kind of rush that payload to spawn in the brig. You've got 2 barrier servitors right when you start, just before you set off with the payload. Fairly easy to deal with, especially if you're running Polaris Lance. They're pretty easy to deal with. Just push that payload until the brig spawns. And then once you've defeated the brig, you can crowd control, you can freeze it, you can suspend it, you can suppress it, just to really stop it. It's pretty bulky. Obviously, you cannot do any precision shot until you bring off its faceplate. So really, this is the one time where rocket launchers are pretty decent here, because you obviously can't precision hit with a rocket launcher anyway. Very bulky target, but the main objective is to get him to spawn in first. Once you've reached the final checkpoint, payload checkpoint, there'll be a series of champions. 3 unstoppables. We've got Barrier Knight. We've got Lucent Wizard. Before you reach that stage, and this is one problem that I ran into. I don't think we were all, we were going into this pretty much blind. We haven't done this before. I've done the strike a few times in like a kind of legend environment, but nothing like Master or Grandmaster. It looks really appealing to stand on the right platform, which is where some of the fallen snipers, or where they did spawn, and where the payload sort of goes around. There's that kind of structure, the sort of Hive wizard structures. Kind of looks like something out of the Throne World. It looks appealing to get up there as a kind of watching down where all the hives start spawning. But the game starts spawning infinite amount of Boomer Knights and Wizards, and they'll just keep on spawning. And it just makes up, concluding the end of the payload escort section, just a lot more frustrating to deal with. So do not stand up there. Don't go up there whatsoever. I went up there once just to see if this was a good spot. I didn't realize that this is where infinite Knights and Wizards spawn, and they're like mini boss tiers as well. So they're just really annoying to kill in the first place. But once we did kill them, another set spawned. So I don't know if there's like a trigger where they stop spawning, but we were just like, okay, we're never going to go up there ever again. So that's your annoying part of the payload section. And really, the end of the payload section there's a lot going on, which is why something like Orpheus Rig Tether, Deadfall Tether, could be a really great help here. If you've got someone dealing with unstoppables, if those two unstoppables get tethered up, you just have to shoot one and both will get stunned because it shares damage between them when they're tethered. Pretty hairy, but there's a lot of room. Obviously, just don't go up into that platform. Retreat if you want. Bring the unstoppables to you just to kind of pin them down one by one. But it can be pretty hairy if this is the first time you've went through. It's just a lot of like annoying ads, a lot of kind of bulky ads. The wizard itself is not difficult to deal with. In fact, we were overkilling the wizard because it was always getting like tethered up by the tether. So either myself or Impetus had to kind of fly in and just crush the ghost before the wizard respawned. But other than that, it's just the bulky targets that are the annoying aspects of the end of the payload. And once you've done that, it's pretty much like 2 steps, and you've got into the middle room, as we're calling it. And this is very close quarters, so we recommend staying outside where the fan blade is, just in the big kind of the pipe. You can kind of pretty easy enough just to burn down some of the unstoppable ogres that spawn in. You've got a nice kind of angle each way. You can go in, kind of hop back out. Hunters, obviously, if you're using Invis, you can go in, get a bunch of ads with your tether, and get some ammo collected. But this is the part where you want to be pretty conservative. You don't want to really rush this unless you're really familiar with how the ads spawn. They kind of spawn pretty much everywhere. There's a spawn door directly on your right side as you enter the room. That's the main kind of problem, where it's like, yeah, we're not going to really go into the room as such. We're just going to stay out in the pipe. You guys got any kind of recommendations for that middle room? We haven't really wrote many notes here. Again, it's nothing that's too difficult. It's just can be a bit time consuming. Is more kind of thing that I thought was kind of not the difficulty part, but it was the time consumption.
I would just say be really liberal with your supers. You'll get your abilities back in the boss fight, and same thing, like there's a heavy ammo crate that spawns in here. There's a lot of enemies. It's like 5 champs total that are in here. Be using your supers and expend some heavy ammo in here, and that's just really going to speed that up, honestly, the most, because there's just a ton of enemies. So pop those supers, chain the orbs between you and your teammates, and don't be afraid to use some heavy ammo too.
This is also the room where stasis turrets and invis hunters will really shine, because one of the runs I went in to go pick up ammo and I died in a really bad spot, and it was so hard for Court and Saint to work on clearing the room out because there was a barrier knight that was just beyond the reach of what they could see standing out in that big large tube. So I was giving them a general location of where the enemies were, but they couldn't actually get an angle to stun the barrier knight before they could come and get me. And that's Court ended up having to go invis and then coming around, stunning the champion and getting my res once we had already wasted quite a few minutes clearing out all the other trash enemies that could be shooting at Court while he was getting my res. So yeah, absolutely use your supers. Please use your abilities that can highlight targets or stun targets, or allow you to navigate into the room safely to go pick up ammo. Again, this is really another reason why I'm recommending Shoot to Loot so much. This room right here, where you are going to have a lot of difficulty freely picking up ammo unless you know where the enemies are and you can navigate around them, or you can grab ammo at a distance.
All right, so once you've kind of went through all that, you've got, just before you teleport into the sort of mind space, whatever it's called, you do have that section with the very unhelpful scions that are just chilling out. They're not really helping us, the friendly scions. and you have to burn down the boss down to almost its first health segment, which can be a bit of an annoyance because he likes to float around these round corners. So this is the part where you could end your run, as Saint was mentioned earlier.
Cut to here.
Yeah, this is where his you get to see first and foremost the Hive Guardians shield super, and how those shield throws defy gravity. They defy all manners of physics. Just completely attached to you. It can be very annoying. But once you've dealt with that, once you bring the shield down, you've got the final boss room. Now this was pretty. I don't think it's the worst of the sort of Psi Ops strike boss rooms, but it can be pretty tricky. So I think how I'm going to kind of approach this is I'll talk about how I was positioned. I've already talked about where I was positioned a few months ago when I was talking about my builds, but I was up on the left side where one of the synaptic spears spawns, and I was your kind of overlooking. I had Wave Splitter, I had Storm Chaser, and I even had a hand cannon. That's still pretty decent range. I think for me, I think that was the best spot for an Invis Hunter. I've got enough kind of breathing room to jump down, gather some orbs, gather some ammo, help out with any resis. But this is where, it's very important that you want to keep suppressing the boss. So as we've said before, as we'll keep hammering it in, the boss cannot be crowd controlled by blind, by freeze, by suspend, but it can be suppressed out of the super. You also cannot, the boss cannot cast his super when he's suppressed. So once you just keep him suppressed, you will keep him out of the super. Suppression grenades are very lethal here. Even if you survive one of its suppression radius, it's fair as it is fairly large. So just watch out while you're traversing. You've also got a death zone below you, lots of holes around the arena as well. And yeah, it's the Sentinel Shield Super, which will absolutely one-shot you in most cases. We recommend hiding. Where I was, it was angled as such where if he cast his super, it would bounce off one of the ramparts, little kind of walls that are kind of around the sort of tower, or it would just bounce off the top of the tower before getting me. So I could crouch down, pretty manageable. And just as a note to those that are keeping track here, so the boss, Ulnath, Light Cleanser, casts his throwing shield twice per attack, up to 4 times while he's in a super. So it's a lot of damage, a lot of shields flying about. It's very important why we recommend bringing someone with some sort of suppression, just to kind of keep it fairly manageable. Because he is, when he's out of his super, he's fairly, other than him again, his suppression grenade defying the laws of gravity and physics, it's pretty manageable. It's just another kind of annoying thing in the background, and it's the ads that become more of a hindrance. But it's his super is like top, like tier 1 alert. It's you really want to keep him out of the super. As for Impetus, where were you standing? What was your kind of positioning in this strike? I know you were fairly close to me.
Yeah, I deliberately chose to be close to Court since he was both the person responsible for suppressing the boss, but also because he had invis. So I was directly below him. The tower that Court was on top of that spawns in the Synaptic Spear on the left side has a ridge that runs around it. So I was actually out kind of behind on the other side of the tower, opposite from where the rest of the play space was, and I was completely obscured from the boss whenever the boss would go into super. So we did have some times where the shields might clip Court, or Court would die to a suppressor grenade if he couldn't react in time. I would probably be suppressed, but I would be fine with my health being below him, kind of on the other side. But the shields could not bounce off of anything to get to me. I was completely safe from that, and so I would just wait for Court or Saint to tell me when he was out of his super, and then I would jump up, grab the res for Court, and then we would go about. Or if Saint had died, then one of us could go and grab Saint while the other was still alive on the other side of the map. So that was pretty deliberate in our area. We had Saint kind of off to the right side, just again generating a bunch of orbs. Court would go over and grab the orbs that Saint was generating, and then I would kind of stay on the left side there deliberately. The center part of the map was not a safe spot to be. I know, Saint, you were in there when you were in your super or doing grenade stuff for like the Unstopped Champion, but those little raised platforms in the center area were just the perfect ricochet spot for those shields. And then the back platform was just, we got wiped there by the shield when he did throw it. So we kind of spread out and went 2 to the left, 1 to the right. I guess you could do the 2 to the right, 1 to the left if you so wanted, but we were pretty spread out in the boss room, which is, again, not something that I think we've done I haven't done that a whole lot of, being completely spread out in a lot of GMs, but it worked really well for us for dealing with the main boss and then also dealing with the aspects of Savathun as well.
Had this not been a Sentinel Shield Hive Guardian, I think all three of us being close together, as we kind of typically recommend, would have been the strat. But because those shields just bounce and then they ricochet at a perfect angle, it just made more sense for us to be kind of more sparsely around the arena. Saint, what was your kind of positioning? Because I know you're a little bit more fluid. There was a lot more movement compared to Impetus and I.
Yeah, I was kind of going back and forth between on the far right side platform, and then you could jump up kind of like behind this little piece of geometry and then go into the middle. And that was kind of like my movement. I would go from like the right side pillar. I would go on the back side of the little, platform right there. And then I would go not all the way on the back platform, but kind of in that mid area just to the left, so that I was like down and to the right from where you guys were, but not quite all the way into the center of the map. And that worked okay because then I was either, kind of moving along that like back mid to right side. And if like Court would generate some orbs, and then I would move into middle and use my super. And then like I would go over to where Court was, and then Court would move to where I was. We would exchange orbs, or, Impetus is like freezing the target to the left side or whatever it was. And I could like turn over and shoot some of the guys with Polaris where they were being frozen kind of like on the back platform over there. But being able to look into mid, like when the ogre spawns on the projection, like with the projection, like being able to like go to mid and like kill that thing real quick, kind of from like right side in mid or from just straight mid, was incredibly helpful. But you can't hang out there for forever. You really should be like kind of moving through there. Yeah, take your stance there, get some linear shots on the boss, get some rockets on the boss or a super, and then probably move over to the right side platform, and then maybe move back to mid and keep going there. But yeah, it's a punishing arena for sure. One of the more deadly arenas we have in GMs, I would say currently in general, especially this season. I would probably say this is the hardest boss arena that we have.
Yeah, so once you've got that pretty much down, keeping the boss in one position or just keeping him suppressed pretty much all the time, he will disperse, he'll disappear during the Savathun's aspect spawning in. So the first time you get an aspect, you only just get one after the first damage phase, and then you get 2 on the second damage phase. It's the first one I think we had a lot more problems compared to the second one, which is a bit strange to say, but I think we kind of agreed that it's because the first projection is a lot more mobile. They're not kind of bound into a specific area like the second set, the 2 in the second phase. The first one just can be really annoying. Just at one point, she's at say like 6 o'clock on where you're standing. Then she's at 3. Then she's at 9 o'clock. It just became really annoying to deal with. But I think our recommendation is when the first one shows up, you get a bunch of ads that spawn in. You get an unstoppable as well. So at this point, like communication is clear and should really be the key thing. Is like, okay, Saint, you're going to deal with the unstoppable champion. You've got the most amount of kind of utility for that. Court's going to deal with the with the ads that are spawning in with his tether, because I've saved that. I've picked up a bunch of orbs, and then Impetus, you're going to kind of snipe down any kind of remnants. And all this time, we're moving around because you do not want to get lit up by any of her attacks. And primarily, it's going to be the arc attack, but you'll see a lot of kind of void Nova bombs, which can be really painful to deal with. As Impetus mentioned earlier, that Nova bomb, if it doesn't kill you in the first one, you really need to react, because you'll get sucked into it, and it will kill you on that damage over time. So the aspects, when you're actually dealing with them, you can only damage them with the Synaptic Spear. So I was being really aggressive with the Synaptic. So once you've dealt with all the ads, you've dealt with the Unstoppables, you're pretty much clear and free to deal with the aspects. You want to really utilize that spear, because you don't want to be in one place. Obviously, it does take you out from first person into third person view, but I would definitely recommend using the blink ability, which is bound to your grenade. FYI, if you're not familiar with using the Synaptic Spear, and just keep blinking around. You get 2 blinks before you have to reset it by going on your going back on ground. But that really helps me out. It's kind of weird to like be hyper aggressive with the spear, but that it can just be really annoying to deal with the aspects.
In that situation, when they first spawned in, Saint would stun the Unstop, you would tether. I actually would jump up to where you were and pick up a Synaptic Spear, and then immediately hit all of the ads that got tethered, because the Synaptic Spear will one-shot a Hive Acolyte. And when it was tethered, I was just dealing mass damage there. It's a lot easier I found it was a lot easier to be more aggressive in my dodging around with the spear when all the other ads were cleared out. You really only had the aspects running around. I would hit the ads, and then by that point, Saint would have stunned the Unstop. So I remember throwing Synaptic Spears at the Unstoppable, because again, it'll respawn once you run out. I mean, it's always there. So it's really just a free, really strong weapon for dealing with any type of enemy, but specifically for the aspects. So yeah, maybe you can save the aggression until you clear out some of the enemies, but use the Synaptic Spear. It's a free weapon to kill a bunch of enemies, and it's very strong, and it's an excellent movement tool once you do need to deal with the aspects.
Yeah, and much like Alakul, when you're up against the aspects, you don't want to be in one place. You cannot be passive when you're attacking her, or if you're defending against her. You just need to keep moving. It's all about movement, because while her attacks are like devastating, they tend to just be kind of one-dimensional. She'll the actual attack is to one point on the map. As long as you're nowhere near that, you should be good. The Nova Bomb can be really annoying to deal with, but you cannot be Nova Bombed when you've long dispersed from where the Nova Bomb is going to land. So it's the first one that we had a lot of difficulty kind of dealing with, but the second set, where you've got 2, you'd think this would be a lot more difficult. The one on the right side, the way it spawns and the way it's kind of pathing and the damage tracking just tends not to really attack. Maybe Saint was the only one that was getting kind of a lot of damage at that time, but when Impetus and I were kind of set up on the left side, we could deal with the left one. I think the left one was the more trickier, and because it's a lot more open, like we had to really burn her down. So again, just the same setup. Saint deals with the Unstoppable, I tether, Impetus jumps up, gets a Synaptic Spear, snipes out all the ads, clear out all the ads, and then we can focus on that left one. And then the right one's pretty simple, because you can ranger. The Synaptic Spear's got some like tracking on top
really
of it. It's
great
pretty
tracking.
aggressive. So, and then kill the boss, and you're done. So I certainly wouldn't say this is the more like complex or difficult out of the kind of battleground or the Psi Ops style GMs that we've had, but it can snowball like a lot of the strikes, and it's if you've got the tools like suppression, if you've got a lot of movement tech, use them. They're to be used at your disposal, and this would be pretty simple, just to kind of clear out. And like we've been saying, we did this first try.
Super easy, 28 minutes and 30-second clear. Not even broke a sweat.
Just a little practice, and then first try.
And then try. I say that it will go by fast. I think if we kept running it after that clear, the successful clear, we could have easily gotten it down to 25 minutes. We got the first section, the payload section, down to like 5 minutes, right? By the time we were heading over, which I don't think any of us were expecting when we realized this was the one with the payload encounter, but we were just very aggressive, got the payload all the way up to where the brig spawned in, burst down the brig, and then from that point, we just stayed right with the payload right up until all the champions and the Lucent Hive spawned in, and then just kind of hung back, had the enemies funnel around the payload, used the payload kind of as cover for when the two champions, unstoppable champions, were pushing towards us. And then Saint just had his finger on the trigger for Polaris Lance the entire time. We had ignitions going off, Cora was tethering and stuff. I mean, it was hectic and there was nonstop action, but we were actually going pretty quick through that section. The second room and the third room are definitely where things can just take a while, especially if you have a weird death. That can really drag on at that point. But we, again, with each run, we were really shaving a lot of time off with everyone, and we were getting to that boss room pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm looking at GM.report. Again, shout out. It's a very robust tool if you want to kind of look at all the kind of stats. You can search us as well if you want to have a look at our runs. We did that 5 times, and our 5th one was our successful attempt. And yeah, I'm looking at the times here. So our 4th one, the last failed attempt before we got our completion, was 40 minutes, and we were in the boss room. I think we were just reaching the last third of the boss's health. Mm-hmm. And then the completion run, we got to 29 minutes. So like we shaved 10 minutes immediately. Definitely one that you can bring down to, I don't know who put 20 to 25 minutes, but yeah, I would agree. 20 minutes, definitely. If you can really speed through the middle section, if you know what you're doing on the last one, you can bring this down to 20 minutes pretty easy.
But you'd have to do suppression. I mean, there's just no way. You have to take the boss out of his super every single time he spawns in. Otherwise,
if you're just
will be
waiting
looking at
on
easy half hour. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like a lot of stuff, it was honing in our loadouts. Oh, well, I want to use Burning Maul over Hammer of Soul. Or what if we switched, our weapons around a little bit and a bunch of stuff like that. That all that memorization stuff and the spawn stuff is like what's really going to allow you to hone in on any GM, right? When you start to get those spawn patterns down, you're executing with your team really efficiently, like you're synergizing, right? That is what's going to get those times down to the 20-ish minutes pretty much.
Another reason why I recommend GM.report is because you can go onto our run, you can just search Court, Saint Kabir, or Impetus. It will show one of our names up somewhere. Click on us, go to the run. I think it was the 28th of January, 2024. And just go on that run. It's 29 minutes and 18 seconds. And you can see our full builds here. You can see the stats. It's basically Trials Report, but for PvE when it comes to Grandmasters. You can see I had Fatebringer, I had Wave Splitter, I had Storm Chaser. Wave Splitter had most of the kills at 44. Saint had Polaris Lance at 82. Impetus had Posterity with 38. Also had Apex and Arbalist. You can see her full builds there as well if you want to just kind of replicate that.
All right. I think that about does it.
Yeah. Fun little GM breakdown. It's been a hot minute since we've done GMs. So that was a nice couple of runs before we finally got it. But definitely one of the GMs of all time. Mm-hmm. All right, so that is episode 95. Thank you for joining us once again. As a reminder, we've dropped down to an episode every 2 weeks. But don't worry, we still have some classic PvE breakdowns and some revisits to the PvE University. If you have any topics or guests you'd like to recommend, then let us know on our socials or on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server. As always, we want to thank our audio engineer Autodidaktos for keeping us sounding great, and of course the Massive Breakdowns patrons and sponsors for keeping the lights on. My name is Court. Great to be back. You can find me over on Twitter, Discord, and the Destiny spreadsheets link tree, which contains not just my infographics and my spreadsheet, but a bunch of great apps, spreadsheets, documentation for all your great science needs over there. Saint, where can we find you?
Yep, my name is Saint Kabir. You can find me by that name hanging out over on Twitter and that Massive Breakdowns Discord server. Impetus?
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Discord and in Destiny, where I will be solo flawlessing dungeons in the upcoming weeks, as next week we have the Shatter Throne in the Rotator, so I'm going to be finishing up my Titan and Hunter solo flawlesses of that before moving on to Pit the following week, and on and so forth, hopefully all the way up until Warlord's Ruin at the very final section there. So I'll check back in with you guys in 2 weeks to let you know how that went. Until then, have a great time in Destiny and any other games you might be playing. We'll see you then.